Bill Hamblin told me just recently on an email. He said, it's such a fascinating thing studying the aspects of the celestial ascent, because in the medieval ages, in the days of the Renaissance, you could read all of the books that had ever been published in your lifetime. And now in our day, with the vast information explosion that we're living in right now and that is occurring, you can't spend a lifetime reading all of the books that are published in just 1 year. So that kind of gives you room for thinking, you know. You say, whoa, that is a lot of material. Well, Hugh Nibley tried, and he did a sensational job giving overall generalized views in far and away more detail than most of us have ever read in our lives. And that is part of what made his writings, unfortunately, somewhat difficult, somewhat obtuse for us. Because one thing, we just don't think about these things. So it's going to be a pleasure for me I have both the first and second editions of both of his books, The Abraham in Egypt and The Message of the Joseph Smith Papyri, two of my very favorite books. I have consistently said, and I'll still say it, The Message of the Joseph Smith Papyri and Egyptian Endowment is in my top favorite 10 books of all the books I own. And I believe Abraham in Egypt is also. That's quite a place to put two of Hugh's books in my top 10 favorites. But I'm constantly referring to them and reading in them and trying to digest them and understand them. And I know they're controversial. There are people. My good friend Paul Osborne, he is an independent Egyptologist on the internet, and he is vehemently anti-LDS scholarship right now, but he is not anti-Mormon. He is a faithful LDS independent Egyptian scholar. I don't agree with everything he writes. I certainly don't like his approach to a lot of things he writes, but he definitely defends Joseph Smith. He's in this for the long haul. He's got a great testimony in that regard. But he doesn't like Hugh Nibley at all. My firm belief, based on reading the sources and having read as broadly as I can in both the ancient Egyptian materials as well as Hugh Nibley's, as well as the other early Christian and all of the parallels that Hugh Nibley brought in, I think Paul Osborne just simply misunderstands Hugh Nibley's stance. And that's okay, because not everyone's going to approach him in the same manner. I was so reverent in my approach to him because of a wonderful spiritual experience that happened to me on my mission when I was first introduced to Hugh Nibley via direct revelation. I won't go into the experience at this point, but I was given access, I'll put it this way, I was given access to his book and approach to the Book of Mormon while I was in Nauvoo, Illinois, on my mission. And it was utterly staggering how it occurred, and so I picked up the book. I realized, maybe there's something in here I need to look at. Well, by the time we had driven back to our area, we had visited Nauvoo for a little while as a group mission conference experience, wonderful experience. I had his entire book, An Approach to the Book of Mormon, read by the time we got home. It was about a 6.5-hour drive back to our area. And I had read his book. I could not put it down. I was absolutely astounded at this Nibley fellow. So I've been collecting him ever since. So anyway, this is basically an introduction to Nibley and his writings and all that. And I'll probably hop, skip, and jump a little bit. But what I want to do is give you a what can I call it, like a Reader's Digest analysis of Nibley and his book, Abraham in Egypt, and I will sprinkle in some materials from the Message of the Joseph Smith Papyri and other sources as I find them and I find them relevant. I think it is utterly incredible and enlightening to read the various Egyptological and Egyptologists' response to several of Hugh Nibley's writings. And Boyd Peterson does a good job of giving a few of these. There were actual personal letters written back and forth between Brother Nibley and the Egyptologist Klaus Baer and John Wilson, and I didn't see any from Richard Parker, but Boyd Peterson does a really good job of kind of summing up that particular era in the 60s when the papyri was given back to the church. And I have copies of all of those letters. I'm not sure if they're copywritten or not. I have never ever shared them. I've never published them or posted them, and I'm not about to right now. I know there was some hot words about Boyd Peterson, including some of these letters in his book, not in a way of misaligning or making fun of the Egyptologists. I don't think people are understanding that aspect. I think it's just a fascinating part of Hugh Nibley's life that he had direct correspondence with the Egyptologists, and powerfully so, and they were very impressed with his materials and work. So I might refer to some of that material too, just to give you an overall background discussion there. And I'll be honest with you, I've had a few people say that my veneration of Hugh Nibley is way over the top. I honor Hugh Nibley. I don't necessarily venerate him. I have found through the years that I have some disagreements with some of his research and materials and conclusions. I believe everybody does. That's true. He did work within the parameters of the scholarship that was available to him in his day, like in the 1960s. Of course, he was using the 1960s scholarship. John Twetness has noted this several times about criticisms of Hugh Nibley. People from this day and age, from this new millennial outlook in the year 2000, 2002, 2004, and 6 and 7, when we look back onto the 1960s, pretty much everything is somewhat dated from that point of view. I mean, look at the Dead Sea Scrolls. The whole cache of documents was suppressed for 45 years. They were just recently released in the 1990s. Well, for this last, say, decade and a few years, the materials on the Dead Sea Scrolls are, of course, far different than what they were in the 1960s. You're not going to stay in the 1960s area of scholarship with the Dead Sea Scrolls and get very far. That's the other beautiful thing about Hugh Nibley. He was constantly updating himself. He understood the true nature of scholarship. The true nature of scholarship is read it all, but believe none of it as the final say-so word and authority and revelation of history or theology or geography or whatever, because the one sure constant is change. Things change all the time. History constantly has to be rewritten. Well, it was directly because of Hugh Nibley that I majored in history and got my bachelor's in 1994 from Idaho State University. Because I was so enamored with reading his materials, I thought, wow, this is a great subject, and it is. And I'm in the process of going back to school to get my teaching certificate, and I will continue on to get my master's and PhD, and I'll go on to teach history eventually, once I get through the schooling. Right now, I'm trying to get through my math. Let me tell you something else. Another analogy that just strikes me, I have never had a formal calculus math class, but I am studying calculus on my own.